Good evening. Welcome to Truth Seekers. My name is Mike Fishkin. Seated next to me is Brandon Church. And Truth Seekers is a program for those of you who are just tuning in that we like to talk about philosophical and spiritual questions and see what answers there are out there. We were just talking a second ago about searching for truth, and Brandon was saying, yeah, if you're wondering about gold, if something's gold, you scrape it off and...
Yeah, if you test gold, you can apply all kinds of tests to it, and what do you find it to be? You find out that it's gold, and when you test everything else, you find that it's not gold. So we can apply tests to things, and we understand that through the material world, through science. We can apply tests and determine what something is and what it isn't, and we're talking about the Bible, and we can bring in all kinds of religious and philosophical, different spiritual viewpoints, and we should be able to test those as well. And when you test something, if you're looking for truth, it should be able to provide some pretty good evidence that it is true, it is gold. And when you test something that's not true, you should find that it's probably not true.
And so we're going to continue on that vein of,
good one.
We're going to continue with that one, with the same film series that we were showing the last couple of weeks on the genetic makeup of all living creatures, particularly in focusing on the human genome. And again, we were talking about this book, The Genetic Entropy and the Mystery of the Genome, written by John Sanford, who taught for over, I think he's still teaching, but because he started these two companies, he got all these patents and was very successful in, he's got a PhD in genetics, and he's invented a number of things, so he just donates his services at Cornell University, but I guess he was tenured there and he's been over there well over 25 years. And he invented, I'll give you these things, of course the secular community likes to ignore him because the best way of censoring someone is to ignore them. And he invented the Biolistic Particle Delivery System, so-called gene gun. He is also the co-inventor of the pathogen-derived resistance (PDR) process and the co-inventor of the genetic vaccination process. He was given the Distinguished Inventor Award by the Central New York Patent Law Association in 1990 and also in 1995. And he's a pretty brilliant guy. That gene gun, as we've talked about before, is used in transferring genes from one plant to another, and virtually all those plant agricultural genetic
creating hybrids and genetically modified food and things like that.
And it wasn't until later in his career, he was an evolutionist throughout his life and teaching, and late in his career he decided to take a closer look at genetic entropy. He was wondering about some things, and he started to see that what he calls the primary axiom, evolution, that the concept we've gone from single cells on up to us, doesn't hold to the evidence that they see genetically. It doesn't hold to the evidence that most geneticists come up with, but yet they still hold to that theory. And we've been talking about that before, Brandon and I, and we're talking about the fact that we're brainwashed as little kids. We go to school and we hear that, that life came from evolution, from single cells and on up, and we hear that. We hear that over and over and over again. And as kids, you have no ammunition to combat that, really. And if you don't search for the gold, the truth, you don't know it's out there and that the evidence is against it. And God says that we don't know too much anyhow, period, on our own, that we need Him. And if we're not listening to Him, we're going to be listening to the brainwasher, the father of all lies. And I came to that conclusion when I was 29. And so we're going to be showing some film clip, the first film clip. And by the way, you can see the date up there. We're live here in Portland, Oregon. So if you're watching right now, Saturday night, June 21st, you can call us. And we can talk about philosophical, spiritual things and the evidence that he's given us that he exists, that there is an intelligent designer, and that the truth, the gold, is apparent to anyone who looks. That song at the beginning of the program written by a guy named John Lord. That's interesting. John Lord wrote that great song that Brandon Church, Michael Fishkin, I don't know. In any case, that if if you look for the gold, it's there, no matter where, for truth. But you got to look, and God says in His Word, you should seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart, not a haphazard hit or miss, but really sincerely wanting to see truth. So we'd love to talk about philosophical, spiritual truth seeking with people who are true truth seekers as opposed to playing games.
And science.
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, if the intelligent designer has designed the whole ball of wax...
If that is where science comes from, science should be able to point us in the same direction as the philosophy and the theology, the Bible. So we do think that that science is another good evidence that God exists and who God is and things like that. So
absolutely. Romans 1, God Himself says that we know, all human beings know, that there is a Creator down deep. But we learn to suppress it because we want to keep away from it, because we've got habit patterns that the Bible says are bad, and we don't really want to change. Change is hard for all of us, no matter what. Moving from one place to another is hard. Moving from one job to another. Well, those are the biggest stress things. They're all related to change, I guess. Divorce, change. They say these are the biggest stress things.
That's true.
And it's all change related, and it's stress to... You're going to upset your family if you're not a follower of this word in here, like I wasn't, coming from a Jewish background. I rejected that because I saw hypocrisy in some rabbis. And then if all your friends, say that, oh, obviously we've evolved, the evidence is all there scientifically, it's going to be stress to have to be rejected by all your friends, and God says that most people don't want to be rejected by all their friends and their family, and they're not going to bother to search for the truth with all their heart because it's going to mean a change, and so they don't want to do it. We're going to go into the first section of film, which is about 6.5, 7 minutes long, and after that we can take calls from you. But last week, before we do that, why don't you just give a brief 1 or 2 minute synopsis of the manual and the little red wagon. Is kind of the
analogy to the genome. Well, the analogy, and Dr. Sanford brings this up. We talked a little bit about this last week. The idea is that if you've got a factory that builds something, let's say it's some small little a vehicle, a little tricycle, a wagon, something like that, and you have all the machinery to shape the metal and to cast the wheels and put it all together, the nuts, the bolts, and even going so far as mixing the paint and carving out the screws and such. And you've got a computer program that controls all the robotics, all the creation of this to do this. That's kind of analogous to the cell itself, because the cell is extremely complex. There's so much in there. And then, say for the sake of this example, you have this factory and it produces a copy of its program, and that goes to another factory, and another copy is made, and so on. So there's this succession of factories, and that's kind of like the cell reproducing itself, as we continue to grow, and also from one generation to the next, and so on. But the copying process is not perfect. So in this computer program, with each successive copy, there's a little bit of a change, little change here and there. How likely would it be for these changes to cause the robotic arms and such to cause changes to, maybe instead of making a wagon, now it's making something larger, maybe a bicycle, and then maybe a motorcycle, and on up to a car and a jet and a space shuttle, and I don't know if you can see, but he actually has a picture of a spacecraft up here on the cover. That's the kind of thing that the human genome is really is analogous to. It's an incredibly complex thing. Now, if you're going to go from something very, very small up to something so incredibly complex as this factory building this spacecraft, simply through mistakes in the computer code that controls all of this.
Mutations, the body, that's what, of course, that's what he's getting at. Go ahead.
That's the mutations in the DNA, in the cells, these minor changes leading to slightly different results. And that's the idea of Darwinism, that these slightly different results lead to maybe something better, maybe something worse, but the worse gets wiped out through natural selection, the better gets preserved. And so you just have these slightly better changes, a little better over time, leading to new species, and eventually we get from a single cell creature all the way up to us.